Did you know that 1 in 10 adults over the age of 60 is a victim of financial abuse, losing an estimated $36.5 billion each year? That's not just a statistic from some government report. I saw it. I saw it in the faces of people who had their life savings wiped out by a smooth-talking predator who sounded like a friend. Now, what is the real difference between a desperate man holding a bank teller hostage and a financial advisor in a $1,000 suit pressuring you to sign papers you don't fully understand? The weapon is different, that's all. One uses fear of immediate death, the other uses fear of missing out, fear of being a burden, fear of a lonely old age. Both are hostage situations. The stakes are just measured in years of your life instead of minutes. For 30 years, I sat across from men who thought they held all the cards. Killers, con artists, thieves. And I learned that getting what you want, getting the truth, getting a peaceful resolution, it isn't about having the bigger gun. It's about having the sharper mind. It's about understanding the person across from you better than they understand themselves. The FBI doesn't teach you how to win arguments. It teaches you how to reshape reality so the other person arrives at your conclusion, thinking it was their idea all along. Today, I'm going to pull back the curtain. We're not talking about dusty old interrogation manuals. We're talking about 5 psychological tactics, honed in life-or-death standoffs, that will give you control in any negotiation you face. Whether you're in a boardroom, a doctor's office, or sitting at your own kitchen table trying to sort out the family inheritance. Because, let's be honest, at our age, every negotiation is a high-stakes one. Before we get into the toolbox, you need to understand the blueprint. Most people walk into a negotiation like it's a boxing match. They've got their list of demands, their counter-arguments, their knockout punch. They think it's about force, about overwhelming the other guy with logic or aggression until he gives up. That's the traditional model, and it's why most negotiations fail or leave at least one person feeling cheated. The Bureau learned the hard way that this approach gets people killed. You can't strong-arm a man who has nothing to lose. Instead, they developed a framework built on something they call tactical empathy. Now, don't let the word empathy fool you. This isn't about feeling sorry for the other person or agreeing with them. It's not about being nice, it's about understanding. It was the deliberate and strategic act of recognizing and verbalizing the other person, SE's perspective and feelings. You're not saying, "You're right." You're saying, "I see that you feel you are right, and I understand why." It's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Think of it like this. Trying to argue with an emotional person is like trying to put out a grease fire with water. All you do is make it explode. Tactical empathy is the fire blanket. You're not arguing with the fire, you're smothering the oxygen that feeds it, the emotion, the fear, the defensiveness. Once the emotional fire is out, then, and only then, can you start dealing with the problem. I had this young detective, a hotshot, who thought he could break any suspect by just pounding the table and shouting facts. He was trying to get a location on a kidnapped girl from her boyfriend, a real piece of work named Donnie. The more the kid yelled, the more Donnie shut down. I pulled the kid out and went in. I didn't mention the girl. I just sat down and said, "It sounds like you feel completely trapped, like everyone is against you and you've got no way out." Donnie just stared at me for a minute, then his shoulders slumped. He nodded. The emotional fire was out. We found the girl an hour later. Have you ever been in a conversation where you knew you were right, but the more you pushed, the more the other person dug in their heels? What do you think was really going on there? They weren't fighting your facts, they were fighting the feeling of being controlled. Tactical empathy is how you give them the illusion of control while you guide the conversation exactly where you want it to go. It's the foundation for everything else we're about to discuss. The simplest and maybe the most powerful tool for building that tactical empathy is called mirroring. All it is repeating the last 1 to 3 words the other person just said. It sounds ridiculously simple, almost stupidly so, but it works like a magic trick. It's not about mimicry, it's about connection. When you mirror someone, you're not just repeating words. You're sending a subconscious signal that says, I'm with you. I'm listening. Continue. It coaxes them to keep talking, to expand on their thought, often revealing things they hadn't planned to. Let me tell you about a case. A bank robbery gone wrong. A guy we'll call Hector, barricaded in the vault with 2 tellers. He's agitated, screaming that he's not going back to prison. The SWAT commander is ready to pump the place full of tear gas. The negotiator gets on the phone. Hector screams, "I'm not going back to prison for 20 years. Instead of saying, "Let's talk about that," the negotiator just says, calmly, "For 20 years?" A simple mirror and a pause. Hector, caught off guard, says, "Yeah, 20 years. That's what they gave my brother. He went in for armed robbery, and that's what he got. I can't do that." You see what happened? The mirror bypassed Hector Ian's defensive brain and got him to reveal the real source of his fear, his brother's sentence. Now the negotiator has something to work with. He's not negotiating about the bank robbery anymore. He is negotiating about Hector's fear of his brother's fate. Let's bring this home. Say you're trying to negotiate your salary for a part-time consulting gig. You ask for $50 an hour. The hiring manager says, "The budget for this role is pretty tight. We were really only authorized for 35 hours." Most people would jump in and start defending their number. Instead, you just use a mirror with a questioning inflection. You say, "Authorized for $35. And then you go quiet. It's not aggressive. It feels collaborative. You've invited them to explain. They might say, "Well, yes, that was the initial number, but I might be able to talk to my boss if we can demonstrate a higher value." Boom. The door just opened. The psychology here is tapping into our innate human desire to be understood. When you mirror someone, their brain lights up in a way that says, "This person gets me." It creates a loop of rapport. They elaborate, you mirror again, and they keep talking, giving you more and more information to work with. When was the last time you felt truly, deeply listened to in a negotiation? How did that change your willingness to cooperate? Try it in a low-stakes conversation this week. A cashier, a family member. Just mirror the last few words they say and see how they automatically expand on their thought without you even having to ask a question. Once you've used mirroring to build some rapport, you need to start shaping the conversation. This isn't done with statements, it's done with questions. But not just any questions. We're not talking about yes or no questions, which corner people. We're talking about calibrated questions. These are open-ended questions that start with what or how. They are designed to force the other person to pause, think, and look at the problem from your perspective. The most powerful calibrated question ever devised is probably, "How am I supposed to do that?" It's a masterpiece of verbal engineering. You're not saying no. You're not being confrontational. You're asking for their help in solving your problem. You're making them your collaborator. This shifts the entire dynamic and puts the burden of finding a solution onto them. I was interrogating a fraud suspect once, a CFO named Margaret. Sharp as a tack. She had an answer for everything. Every piece of evidence I presented, she had a perfectly plausible explanation. The U.S. attorney was convinced she was going to walk. We had her dead to rights on a specific set of falsified invoices, but she kept insisting her assistant must have made a mistake. Arguing was pointless. So I leaned back, looked at the pile of evidence, then looked at her, and I said calmly, "Margaret, I hear what you're saying, but the DA wants to indict you for fraud based on these documents. How am I supposed to go back to him and tell him it was just a clerical error?" I didn't accuse her. I enlisted her. She sat there, silent, for almost a full minute. The gears were turning. She was no longer fighting me. She was trying to solve my problem. She finally said, Maybe I could look at the files again. There might be something I overlooked." She gave up her lawyer 2 hours later. This works everywhere. This might sound backward, but one of the most important goals in any negotiation is to get the other person to say, no. We're conditioned to hunt for yes. We think yes is the finish line, the sign of victory. But chasing yes makes people defensive. They feel like they're being led into a trap, like a salesman is trying to get them to agree to a series of small things so they can back out of the big one. It feels cheap, and people's walls go up immediately. But no is magic. No is protection. When you give someone permission to say no, you've given them an escape route. They feel safe. They feel in control. And when a person feels safe and in control, they relax. They listen. They become open to suggestion. A no is not the end of the negotiation, it's the beginning of one. I had a case involving a dispute between two business partners, Sal and Frank. They were on the verge of a lawsuit that would have destroyed the company they'd built for 40 years. They wouldn't even be in the same room. I got Sal on the phone first. I didn't start with, "Do you want to save your company?" or "Are you willing to find a compromise?" That just invites a phony yes that means nothing. Instead, I started with a question designed to get a no. I said, "Sal, it seems like you've decided to give up on this partnership completely." He came back instantly, almost shouting, "No, that's not it at all. I put my life into this company. Frank is the one who's being unreasonable." Perfect. By saying no, he defined his position and corrected me. He felt he had set the record straight and was now in charge of the conversation. I did the same with Frank. A couple of no-oriented questions later, and they were both open to the idea of a mediated meeting. They just needed to feel they hadn't been pushed into it. In a business setting, you can use this to handle objections. A potential client says, "Your price is too high." Your instinct is to defend your price. Instead, you can try to get a no. "It seems like you think there's no value in what we're offering at all." They'll almost certainly say, "No, that's not true. We see the value, it's just a matter of budget." And just like that, you're not talking about price anymore. You're talking about budget and value. A much more productive conversation. Psychologically, saying no reaffirms a person's sense of autonomy. It's a basic human need to feel in control of our own decisions. When you take that away, we fight back. When you grant it, we become more cooperative. When was the last time saying no made you feel safer in a conversation? How can you start a negotiation by giving the other person the power to say no to you right from the start? It's a fundamental shift in strategy, moving from trapping someone into a yes to making them feel safe enough to say it willingly. Human beings are fundamentally irrational creatures. We are not driven by cold, hard logic, we are driven by emotion and fear. And one of the most powerful psychological drivers is loss aversion. The principle is simple. People are more motivated to avoid a loss than to achieve an equivalent gain. Losing $100 feels much worse than finding $100 feels good. Con artists and high-pressure salespeople have known this for centuries. They frame their scams around the fear of losing out. This is a limited-time offer. Someone else is about to buy this house. If you don't invest now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. They are weaponizing your own brain against you. But, like any powerful tool, it can be used ethically to frame a negotiation in a way that encourages a fair outcome. It is not about tricking someone, and about making sure they clearly understand the stakes and what they stand to lose by inaction. Let's say you're a family trying to convince an elderly parent, let's call her Eleanor, to accept in-home care. She's fiercely independent and resists, seeing it as a loss of freedom. Arguing about the benefits, the gain of safety and help, isn't working. So you reframe it using loss aversion. You might say, "Mom, we're worried that if you were to have a fall and couldn't get to the phone, you could lose the ability to stay in this house at all. We want to do everything we can to prevent you from losing your home." Suddenly, the conversation isn't about gaining a caregiver, it's about not losing her independence and her house. The motivation to act becomes immensely stronger. In my line of work, we use this to set boundaries and create urgency. When a suspect was stalling, refusing to cooperate, I wouldn't threaten him with what would happen. I'd frame it as what he was about to lose. I'd say, "Right now, you have the opportunity to tell your side of the story to the DA. You can frame the narrative. But if you wait until we find the next piece of evidence, that opportunity is gone. You will lose the chance to have any control over how this looks. I wasn't lying. I was simply highlighting the value of an opportunity that was about to disappear. Have you ever bought something you didn't really need because you were afraid the sale would end? That's loss aversion at work. To use it ethically, you must anchor it in reality. You are not manufacturing a loss, you are clarifying a real one. It's about creating a sense of urgency by highlighting the negative consequences of not making a decision. It's a way to cut through procrastination and force a choice, ensuring that the other party is fully aware of what's at stake if they fail to act. In a world that never stops talking, one of the most underutilized and misunderstood techniques in any negotiation is silence. People are terrified of it. A pause of more than a few seconds in a conversation feels awkward, uncomfortable, even hostile. And so, we rush to fill it with noise, with words, with concessions. When you learn to master strategic silence, you let that discomfort work for you instead of against you. After you've made a point or asked a calibrated question, the most powerful thing you can do is shut up. Let the silence hang in the air. The other person's brain will be screaming at them to fill the void. And when they do, they will often talk themselves into a corner, reveal a weakness, or make a concession you never even asked for. I once had a suspect in an arson case, a business owner who torched his own warehouse for the insurance money. He was slick, and he had an alibi. I had him in the box, and I'd laid out my entire case. All the circumstantial evidence, the financial motives, everything. He just sat there with a smug look on his face and said, "You got nothing." Instead of arguing, I just stared at him. I didn't scowl. I didn't look angry. I just looked at him, calmly, and let the silence stretch. 10 seconds, 20, 30. It felt like an eternity. He started to fidget. His smug look faltered. Finally, he blurted out, "Look, even if I did do it, you can't prove my brother wasn't involved. He had just given me a co-conspirator I didn't even know existed." The dam broke. The whole case came from him breaking the silence. In a boardroom, this is just as potent. You've stated your price for a project. The client says, "That's way too high." Your instinct is to immediately start justifying your price or offering a discount. Don't. Just hold your ground. Look at them with a calm, inquisitive expression and stay silent. Let them be the first to speak. More often than not, they will be the one to offer the next move. They might say, "Could you do it for X?" Or, "What if we removed this part of the project?" They are now negotiating with themselves. A crucial point here is cultural awareness. In some Eastern cultures, silence is a sign of respect and contemplation. In the West, it's often seen as a problem to be solved. You have to be aware of your context. But in most American business or personal negotiations, the person who can withstand the silence holds the power. The psychology is simple. Silence creates pressure. It forces introspection. When you are silent, the other person is forced to think about what you just said and what their response should be. It gives your words weight and gravity. When was the last time you used a pause to your advantage in a conversation? Did you notice how the other person reacted? Try it. Next time you state your position, just stop talking and count to 7 in your head. See what happens. Let's put this all together in a real-world case study so you can see how these principles weave together. We had a situation, a classic FBI crisis negotiation. A disgruntled employee, let's call him Mark, had been fired from a tech company. He came back to the office with a weapon and took his former boss, the CEO, hostage. He wasn't a killer. He was a desperate man whose identity was tied to his job. He felt humiliated and betrayed. The SWAT team is outside and the negotiator gets on the phone. Mark is agitated, yelling about how the company ruined his life. The negotiator doesn't argue. He starts with a mirror. Mark yells, "You don't know what it's like to have everything taken away." The negotiator replies, "Taken away?" This prompts Mark to unload his story about his sick wife, his mortgage, his 20 years of the loyal service. The negotiator is just listening, building a profile using tactical empathy. Next, the negotiator moves to calibrated questions. He doesn't say, "Let the CEO go." He says, "It sounds like you feel completely disrespected and that nobody has listened to you. What does a good outcome look like to you today?" This forces Mark to think beyond his anger and envision a future. He starts talking about wanting his story heard by the press, about wanting a public apology. The negotiation has shifted. To create safety, the negotiator uses the power of no. He says, "I'm sure you're not planning on hurting anyone today, are you?" Mark's immediate response is, "No, I'm not a murderer." He has just put his own boundary on the situation. He feels he has asserted his control and his identity as a nonviolent person. As time drags on, the negotiator introduces loss aversion. "Mark, right now you have a story to tell and people are ready to listen. But if this situation goes on much longer, you're going to lose the chance to be seen as a man who was wronged. The narrative will change." He's not threatening Mark. He's showing him what he stands to lose: public sympathy. Throughout this, there are long periods of silence, where the negotiator lets Mark sit with his thoughts, creating pressure for Mark to find a way out. Eventually, Mark surrenders without anyone getting hurt. Now, let's transpose this. You're trying to sell your family's small business. The buyer is lowballing you, offering a price that feels insulting. Instead of storming out, you start with a mirror. Knowing the theory is one thing. Putting it into practice when your heart is pounding is another entirely. You need a plan. Let's call this your pre-negotiation checklist. I never walked into an interrogation room without knowing exactly what my goal was, what my limits were, and what I knew about the person on the other side of the table. You must do the same. First, define your objective. And I mean precisely. It's not just sell the house. Sell the house for a minimum of $350,000 with a closing date no later than June 1st. Write it down. This is your anchor. Second, gather intelligence. Who are you negotiating with? What are their motivations? What pressures are they under? Are they the final decision maker? If you're negotiating with your son-in-law for a loan repayment, you need to understand his financial situation, his pride, his relationship with your daughter. The more you know, the more levers you have. Third, prepare your calibrated questions. Don't try to think of them on the fly. Based on your objective and intelligence, write down 3 to 5 key what and how questions that will guide the conversation toward your goal. Questions like, what does a fair arrangement look like to you? Or, how can we solve this problem in a way that works for both of us? Fourth, know your walk-away point. This is non-negotiable. At what point is the deal so bad that no deal is better? Knowing this gives you immense power. It means you are not desperate. And when you're not desperate, you can negotiate from a position of strength. During the negotiation itself, your primary job is to manage your emotions. If you feel yourself getting angry or flustered, that's a red flag. It means you're losing control. Use a simple trick. Focus on your breathing and wiggle your toes in your shoes. It sounds silly, but it's a physical action that grounds you in the present moment and pulls you out of your emotional reptile brain. And after the negotiation, win or lose, the relationship often matters. This is especially true with family. Don't gloat if you win, and don't be bitter if you lose. A simple, "I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with me," goes a long way. The goal of a good negotiation isn't to crush the other party. It's to achieve your objective while preserving, or even strengthening, the relationship for the future. Because you never know when you'll be sitting across the table from them again. Now for the warning label. These techniques are powerful. They are tools of influence, and like any tool, they can be used to build or to destroy. If you use them without genuine curiosity and a desire for a mutually agreeable outcome, they will backfire spectacularly. People can smell manipulation a mile away. If you're just mirroring words like a parrot without actually trying to understand, you'll sound robotic and condescending. If you ask a calibrated question with a sarcastic or aggressive tone, it's no longer a question, it's an accusation. The entire framework of tactical empathy collapses if there's no actual empathy behind it. You have to genuinely want to understand where the other person is coming from, even if you don't agree with it. Context is also critical. The way you negotiate with a car salesman in Dallas is not the same way you negotiate with a shopkeeper in Tokyo. The use of silence, directness, even who speaks first, can be interpreted very differently across cultures. Misread the cultural context, and you could kill a deal before it even begins. Do your homework, but the biggest pitfall is ethical. There's a fine line between influence and manipulation. Influence, done right, is about guiding someone to see a shared benefit. Manipulation is about tricking someone for your own selfish gain. Using loss aversion to help your mother accept care is influence. Using it to scare her into signing over her house is a crime. Where do you draw the line? I always used a simple test. At the end of this, will all parties looking back feel the process was fair? Could I explain my actions and motivations to a reasonable third party without feeling ashamed? Your reputation, your self-respect, that's the only currency that truly matters in the long run. Use these skills to solve problems, to diffuse conflict, to advocate for yourself fairly. Don't use them to become the kind of person I used to put in handcuffs, because trust, once broken, is almost impossible to negotiate back. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the vault of a bank to the family dinner table. We've talked about mirroring to build rapport, calibrated questions to shape the conversation, the power of no to create safety, loss aversion to create urgency, and silence to create pressure. These aren't just tricks. They are a fundamentally different way of approaching human interaction. It's about moving from a battle of wills to a collaborative search for a solution. It's about having the patience and the skill to uncover the hidden motivations and fears that drive every single person you meet. Knowledge by itself is just trivia. It only becomes power when you apply it. So here is my challenge to you. This week, just once, pick a low-stakes conversation. It could be with the person at the grocery store checkout, a neighbor, anyone. And try just one thing. Try a mirror. When they say, "It's been a really long day," just respond with a calm, inquisitive, "A really long day?" Then stop. Just listen to what comes next. See how they open up. See how a simple reflection of their own words makes them feel heard. That's your first step. Master that, and you're on your way. If you found this useful, and you want more insights from a man who spent a lifetime reading people, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you're serious about taking control of your life. And be sure to turn on notifications, because in our next video, we're going to talk about the 3 subtle body language cues that instantly reveal when someone is lying to you. You won't want to miss it.